How's it going, and welcome to No Fun Allowed's Guide series on Curse of Strahd, a 5th edition module. We are finally wrapping up Castle Ravenloft. It has been a long time in the process, but we are finally here. Of course, there's going to be a ton of spoilers. Players do not watch this, but DMs that want added insight on the conclusion to this place, go ahead and stick around because there is a lot to cover. And here it is, the first location we're going to be looking at today, Sergei's tomb. So, once again, James RPG art, love it. It's just so great. Your players, in order to make their way inside of here, have to make a DC 25 strength check in order to open this thing. Meaning that a normal person that doesn't spec into strength cannot possibly succeed on this thing. So you are going to need someone that can actually lift to get inside of here. When your players descend down the steps, there they can see, chiseled into the slab, Sergei von Zarovich. So what's interesting about this coffin is that it opens easily for a lawful good creature. However, if you are any other type of alignment, it requires a DC 15 strength check in order to open. Inside, your players will be able to see Sergei's body perfectly preserved. Magic has been, in fact, preserving it. Because Sergei looks so incredibly good, people might suspect that he's a vampire waiting to strike out or something. But no, he is dead. He's been dead for quite some time. Strahd killed him in order to form his pact. So when your players open this thing up, they can see that not only is he immaculate, but his armor is immaculate as well. And if your players start messing around with it, they will discover that Sergei was entombed in +2 plate armor. Natural 20 AC. Oh my goodness. People are going to be ripping that thing off. In addition to the armor, the Fortunes of Ravenloft may guide you here, in which case the treasure will be found next to Sergei's body. If your card indicates that your encounter with Strahd is here, he is lying across Sergei's coffin, weeping. Of course, there is a ton of great things you can do with that. So the thing about Sergei's tomb here is, one, it's pretty hard to get into. Some groups physically cannot get in here, which is pretty funny. But should your players make them inside of here, if you have someone that is of the good variety, hopefully they're not tomb robbing and stealing this guy's armor, because that's kind of a dick move. In addition, your players may think to themselves, hey, this guy's so well preserved, let's try bringing him back to life. In which case, I would go ahead and say, if you have some sort of magics that could let you bring people back to life, specifically the dark powers to resurrect people back from the dead, then there is an amazing moment to be had here where you can bring back Sergei. So here's the thing. We don't get any stat block on Sergei, because presumably he's not supposed to show up in this campaign. But I've heard it happen many a time. It's possible, you know, your players may understand the connection between Sergei, Strahd, and Irina, and go ahead and try and reconvene the two in life rather than in death, which I personally think is a lot better, because screw having to die and your soul, you know, not being who you are, sort of thing. Kind of weird. But what I'm thinking here is your players bring back Sergei to life, and there is an amazing story to tell here, where Sergei gets brought back, and then you have one epic conclusion, a fight with Strahd, and it's the light versus the darkness, good versus evil. I think there's a lot of great symbolism to be had with that. But let's say your players already beat up Strahd, and then they decide to do this after the campaign. I think there's some merit to that as well. If your players decide to look around Castle Ravenloft and decide, hey, Sergei's here, let's go ahead and see what he has to say. And they can go ahead and cast Speak with Dead on him, or resurrect him, or whatever. There's a lot of great things that can be gleaned from this character. Now, I'm sure plenty of people have already done their own versions of a resurrected Sergei. I personally think it'd be really cool if he was just a high-level fighter or a high-level paladin, one of the two. But regardless, I think there is a lot of great things to be had with that. Down here in Area 86, we have Strahd's tomb. Once again, this thing is not easy to get to because, one, there's all those teleportation traps that are right in front of it. And two, once your players actually get here, it's still another DC 25 strength check, which not everyone can do. Your players finally make their way inside of here, and there they can see it. This place is not as resplendent as Sergei's tomb. This place is empty. Except it's not actually empty. Your players will actually soon discover that this place is quite inhabited. Something to note about both Sergei and Strahd's tombs is that there are portcullises, and in fact there are levers. And if these levers are pulled down, and then the portcullis goes down. So there is some fun times we had where you players could get, in fact, locked in this area and would have to fight whatever they're going up against. Your players make their way down the stairs, and they go up to the coffin, and what awaits them? Well, rising from the earth, 3 of Strahd's brides emerge, Ludmilla, Volenta, and Anastasia. They rise to attack anyone that approaches Strahd's coffin. once again, I will be going into all these named NPCs in the Castle Ravenloft series because there's so much great things that can be done with these characters. So there's those 3 empty alcoves right there, and your players may get a little curious and start looking around, maybe digging up this area. In which case, then, of course, the teleportation is going to happen. Should they enter the western alcove there, they'll be teleported to Crypt 32. For treasure here, we actually discovered that those 3 brides are styling. Each one of them has tons and tons and tons of gold in jewelry on them. Pretty cool. Also, as you can indicate by that big X, this is one of the teleportation locations all the way back in Area 78, where your players hopefully didn't get into a fight with those iron golems. Should the fortunes of Ravenloft guide your players here, they will find the item resting in the center alcove in the back. And should your players have the card reading that leads them to Strahd, Strahd is found here. And as a really big troll, he is in his coffin and he's just ready to attack anyone that opens the lid. You know, I think that's a little too on the nose for a vampire fight, but I think that's pretty funny. Of course, the more important thing about this location is that not only is this one of the locations that you can find Strahd, but this is a guaranteed location to find Strahd when your players drop Strahd down to 0 HP, but they did not do the necessary requirements to kill him. He is going to transform into mist, and he's going to fly directly here. He's going to fly to this coffin, and he is going to go ahead and sit there and regenerate. So a good chunk of campaigns that have your players dealing with Strahd end right here, because your players beat him up, and unfortunately he wasn't in sunlight when he dropped to 0 HP, and whatever else. He comes all the way back here, and he starts regenerating. Your players race down here, and your players can finally put an end to his machinations. In Area 87, we have the Guardians, and Area 88, we have Tomb of King Barov and Queen Ravenovia. So once again, just that art, so great. And what's interesting about this location is a creature of lawful good alignment that moves west to east, you know, basically moving in the direction of where you'd be walking for the first time here. A lawful good creature can walk this path no issue. However, creatures of other alignments that do so are teleported back to the top of the stairs behind them. So basically what that means is if you are not a saintly individual, then you are going to constantly just run down these stairs and get teleported back. But there is a workaround here. A small creature can squeeze behind and around one of these statues here, the Guardian, and circumvent this curtain of light. So here's the thing. If you have something that's desperately needed here and you are playing alignments and no one in the group is lawful good and no one in the group is small, then unfortunately, you're going to have to think of something here. You are going to have to either lift something or your players are going to have to get really creative here because your players just simply won't have a way. Of course, there's a lot of workarounds behind that. Your players could maybe go ahead and just beat up on the statues and then clear a path. Maybe your players just teleport to the other side. Maybe your players decide to put up some darkness spell or something. There's a ton of workarounds if you're playing rules as written, but of course I strongly recommend that if you have a group of more dubious people and they need to get here for whatever reason, then you go ahead and lift up one of these requirements. And then finally, oh my goodness, finally, Area 88, we have the Tomb of King Barov and Queen Ravenovia. So when your players make their way inside of here, they can see that this place just, you know, looks absolutely beautiful. But what's really cool is, just like that image shows, your players could theoretically look outside the window. And that stained window is unfortunately so dirty you can't really see outside of it too well. But should your players do any sort of looky-looing or breaking of the windows, they could in fact see the village of Barovia down below, and it's pretty cool. And also very fun to note here, because this could be impactful, anyone who falls out of a window here plummets almost 900 feet to the base of the Pillarstone of Ravenloft. So, you know, that's bound to happen if there's some fighting going on in here, right? So what's also interesting about the coffins here is that there is, in fact, a wax effigy that will allow your players to see what they look like in life. If your card reading reveals a Fortune of Ravenloft in here, it lies atop Queen Ravenovia's coffin. If your card reading indicates that there is an encounter with Strahd, then he is here in a frenzy of rage and despair. Of course, there's once again just a ton of great roleplay opportunities to be had here, whether it's interacting with Strahd or one of his servants, or if your players decide to bring back the dead in here or do something else. There's a ton of great things to be had here. Alrighty, so we are finally done with looking at every single location and talking a little bit about each location. So now for finishing up the Castle Ravenloft series, I just wanted to go ahead and talk about some things about the castle. The first one being your player's arrival to Castle Ravenloft. I've already talked about this castle in the Dinner with Strahd video I have, but for a refresher here, in my personal opinion, I think the campaign works best if you show up to Castle Ravenloft a few times in the campaign, not just once. Because there are so many factors, so many NPCs, and so many little things that work beautifully if your players show up here multiple times. It allows your players to understand what is going on here. It allows your players to interact with a ton of great NPCs and they can get some fun back and forth on. And it allows them to prepare a little bit before the end game. Yes, of course, you can go ahead and just move a ton of these NPCs out of the castle. You can go ahead and change some of the events so that they don't have to shadow around the castle. You can do a lot of these things so that Castle Ravenloft is a one and done for your campaign. But me personally, I think that there's just such a beauty to coming to this place, especially at a low level. If you're invited here at levels 3, 4, 5, whatever, then your players are going to know that they are too weak to do anything. And they're probably not going to do anything. And guess what? If they do anything, then Strahd can beat him up, or one of the many servants can go ahead and beat him up. And that's perfectly fine. It instills in them some sort of knowledge, or maybe some hate and resentment, and some justice. You know, it allows your players to have a reason to come back here at some point in the future. So I totally condone having your players show up to Castle Ravenloft once or twice before the grand finale. And when your players show up there, you don't read off all of the flavor text that pertains to, you know, how dingy and terrible this place is. You allow this place to feel a little bit, you know, more lived in. And then in that last one, where they finally get invited to dinner for the final time, and when they leave, that's when all of a sudden the castle closes in on them. That's when this castle's true horror comes to life. And that's when they get to explore the majority of it. The second thing I wanted to talk about here is the exploration of Castle Ravenloft. So, of course, in regards of the random encounters, we get told whenever you move to a new location, meaning that you move from Area 4 to Area 5, then you go ahead and roll up a d20, and every 10 minutes you go ahead and roll on that random encounter table as well, just to see if anything happens. And on an 18, 19, and 20, and then you go ahead and roll on that random encounter table. That can be theoretically not enough for some people. It really comes down to the kind of game that you run. Is combat a sport? Is combat draining? Is combat supposed to be impactful and meaningful? You know, that really comes down to the individual table that you have. Some people run 5e so differently from others, it's really impossible to give a just general blanket statement. The third thing I wanted to talk about was the named NPCs. So I will be doing its own separate video on that, don't worry. But in regards of the named NPCs here, it states that a lot of them are just going to go ahead and fight to the death. Fighting to the death is relatively boring, however. What ends up happening a lot of times is your players meet someone cool and then they just get into one little fight real quick, and then you miss out on a lot of roleplay and flavor potential. If you have NPCs run away, then they can be used at a later time. And that could be just such a fun attrition battle where your players get into a fight with Rahadin, for example, and both sides take some losses. Rahadin pulls back, and then your players are left there sitting, oh man, did we actually win that engagement, yes or no? And they may have won it, but at what cost? I think that is sort of a fun aspect of this campaign. Number 4 I want to talk about is leaving Castle Ravenloft. And what I mean by that is specifically before they deal with Strahd. So if this is the air quote final time that your players are showing up to Castle Ravenloft, the place is closed off, the portcullis is down, the drawbridge up, they cannot escape. Of course, if they're a high enough level, then they can escape if they want to, right? All it takes is one cast of fly for everyone to get out of here. It's really not that hard. And also, if I guess they're willing, they could go ahead and use climber's kits to go all the way down 900 or 1,000 feet or whatever. But that sounds like a little too dangerous to me. So what if you build this up as the finale and your players say, nah, screw this, we don't want to do that, and they go ahead and leave? Then unfortunately a lot of buildup is for nothing. And then you got to figure out a way to get them to Castle Ravenloft again. Or if you really decide to, then yeah, Strahd could go ahead and just go out and fight them somewhere else. I think there's a lot of fun potential places for Strahd to meet his demise in, but Castle Ravenloft is just so iconic, I wouldn't want to rob this campaign of it. Number 5 here is the allies that your players are bringing with them. So yes, hopefully they have their fated ally with them and during this whole engagement. whether they be a little girl or they be a hulking gladiator or an archmage. Whoever they are, hopefully they've got someone by their side who's helping them out. In regards of some of the weaker NPCs, that's not going to be much, but at least it'll be something. So yes, the Fated Ally should be joining the party in the final excursion to Castle Ravenloft, unless for some reason they get killed early on, which would suck. But the thing is that they are not the only person that can join the party, right? There could be other people alongside them. So let's say you have Mordenkainen as your ally. Then, of course, your players could meet Esmeralda and Van Richten and any number of people they could theoretically try and convince to storm the castle here. Of course, it has been done before. Other people have stormed the castle. In fact, that is a encounter you can get. You can get some angry villagers that are storming this place and trying to look around. Your players could be crafty and persuading enough to get a ton of allies by their side. In which case, you have to decide, do you keep on running this place as written, or do you meet the challenge? If they've got a ton of NPCs by their side, do you throw in more stuff against them? That, once again, comes down to the kind of game that you are running. If they have a ton of NPCs by their side, then are you having it where they fight and the NPCs fight other creatures and it's sort of just, you know, abstract? Or are you rolling just one big initiative there and you got to go ahead and match the odds? Number 6 here is time. And I'm not talking about in-game time because that's something that should be tracked here anyway. I'm talking about out-of-game time. So back in the day, Castle Ravenloft used to be ran as a one-shot. But the thing is we live in a different world now, and more importantly, we have a different system. So time in-game and out-of-game is a different factor. Do you imagine that your party is only going to spend 1 or 2 sessions in this castle? Or do you think that this is going to be a multi-month process where your players are going up against tons of things all the time and stretching this place out, meaning that outside of the game time, that is months and months in real world? You really should take that into consideration, because as much as I love Castle Ravenloft, I do believe that pretty much any single dungeon that isn't a mega dungeon in that sense will wear and tear on the people. You don't want Castle Ravenloft to lose its charm. You want this thing to be special and near and dear to the players' hearts. So to that degree, I would say try and keep Castle Ravenloft as short as possible. But not cutting anything, but just making sure that your players are moving forward in any one direction. And for number 7 here, I just want to say, don't feel obliged to run everything as written. I stress this all the time, but you don't need to run these modules as written. In fact, you should not run these modules as written. So if you see anything in Castle Ravenloft that you don't find particularly pleasant, you find disturbing, you find annoying, whatever the case may be, go ahead and change it to your heart's desires. That is what we are here for as the community. If you've got any questions about anything, then go ahead and ask. People are willing to tell you their experiences with it, and if your idea is good or not. You can go ahead and ask this community and they will happily oblige. There's plenty of things I change about not only this campaign, but specifically Castle Ravenloft here. But of course, I just went over the series just to get a general overview as more rules as written. But feel free to do whatever you desire. And wow, would you look at that. Finally, all of the locations done. I've still got a few things left to talk about in this campaign, don't you worry, but that is it for the locations. This campaign has just been an absolute delight to go over. There is a reason why the community is so fanatical over this campaign, because it's got so many great elements to it. It's such a nice enclosed sandbox slash railroad slash roller coaster. It's got everything that I want. It's got all these named NPCs that are lovable or hateable. It's got these iconic set piece locations, and it's got these quests that just seem real and relatable to the players. Oh man, this campaign is just so fantastic. Of course, there's a few things left for me to cover. I've got some villains voice coming up. I've got some running the final encounters in Castle Ravenloft coming up. I've got a whole bunch of fun things lined up, don't you worry. But that is it for the running individual locations guide. I can't believe it's already over. That was an absolute blast. So thank you so very much for watching. So go ahead and tell me, what were your highlights of this campaign? What were the locations you liked the most, and what were the locations you didn't like? What did you change about this module? Because every single person that runs this campaign changes something somewhere. Every single person does. Nobody runs this thing as written. The only people that are running this thing completely as written are having a fun time of it as well, I guarantee you. So go ahead and tell me all those things because I want to know. But that is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you to all my amazing patrons up here. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. That is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for listening. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.